CSIS 1430 is filmed before a live studio audience.
So let's pick up where we left off the other day. We basically got the whole site pretty much done. It's not responsive, obviously. And there's a few things, like I want to put some hover effects in here. And I want to get the little icon in the search thing. Let's go back and open up our document here. So how could we put those white lines there? Any thoughts on how to do that? Yeah, just a right border. That's all we need, not even a left, yeah. Really easy. So that's the ULLI business right here. So we could just put them on the on the LIs. That'll be fine. Border 1 pixel, solid white. Border right. There it is. Pretty easy, right? Now you'll notice though, when we put a hover effect on this, so we'll just do a little hover, and on hover we will say background color. It's already 333 is the current color, so we'll do like 555, just a shade lighter. So we get this, but notice at the very left there, do you see that? The little edge right there? That is from a problem that I believe we've discussed in class. Right here, do you remember this, where this space from here down to here, right? So we'll just delete all that. We'll save it, refresh, and you see it's right up against the edge there, right? That's what we want. And let's put a transition on that so that it doesn't just flicker, and we'll be done with that. So that's going to be right on here. Transition background 500 milliseconds. Nice. Okay, pretty cool. So this is all looking pretty good. This is good. Let's put a hover on these guys right here, and then we'll deal with that search thing, and then we'll start making it responsive. So those are the social icons, and I believe I'm targeting that somewhere in my CSS. So I just did Control F for find, and then I'm looking for the word social, and I don't have it anywhere, which means nowhere in my CSS am I targeting that right there. So let's do that. We'll put that in our header section. I think that's good. So div.social, and we want, believe it's anchors then images. Yep. So anchor image, and when we hover over that, we'll just scale it a little bit. Transform scale 1.1. Right? That just grows it just a hair. And then we'll just put a transition on the original. Transform 500. Okay. There we go. Right? Pretty good. It's a little crowded there on the right, but that's where the 10 hours of CSS per hour rack up is, we're not going to bother with that, okay? But that looks pretty good, right? Let's figure out how we can put that little icon right there, right? I know you guys are excited to learn that. It's pretty easy, this little thing there. So what we do is we go to my favorite icon place, iconfinder.com, and we're going to go search for search. And there we go, all these little magnifying glasses. We're going to go to the free ones and no link back licenses, and there we go. So as always, we click on it, then we come in here and we click on the size we want. Let's go to more sizes, get something a little bit smaller. Like, I think 24 is a pretty good size. There's something wrong with the site. Normally it scales it properly when you do that. It'll download just fine, but for some reason the past few days it's been squishing them like that. It's weird. All right, so here we go, icon finder, and we'll just call that search, and we will add it to our image folder. All right, so in the CSS, we just go to our search, which is this input box right here, and we say background image URL, and we need to go, we're currently in the CSS folder, right? So we need to go up, so dot, and then go into the image folder, and then look for search.png, and that's it. Now, it's not going to be styled the way we want, but it will be inside of there now when we do this. Refresh. And there you go. It's all over the place, right? It's in there a bunch of times. So the way you fix that is you turn off the background repeat with background repeat, no repeat. And now you got one of them. Not quite where we want it, right? So you can position it, right? We can say background position. You can say center if you want. And it's dead center there. Not exactly the effect we're going for though, right? We could say left center. And now it's all the way to the left and centered there, which is basically where we want it, right? So let's push some padding over there to move that placeholder out of the way. So padding left, 25 pixels. Looks all right. Yeah. Now it's so small you can't really tell what's going on there. Right there's it's a little dude with a magnifying glass, but it's kind of unclear. So I think we probably should use one of these, but any image will work. Let's do that one. And we'll go again to 24, download it, and we'll just name it a search again, and we'll overwrite the one that's already there so we don't have to do anything else. So just right there, dump it in, place, and refresh. There you go. Now let's scooch it over here, okay? And so in our position, right now we're saying left center. We could actually say like 5 pixels. And that scooches it over nice, okay? That placeholder now seems kind of weird and redundant and maybe not useful. So let's move that. Okay, not bad. You could argue that's maybe a bit of a bold image and you want something a little bit more subtle. But again, 10 hours of CSS per 1 hour of HTML, right? So, but now you know how to do it. You can go tweak it however you want. And the one property you might want to spend some time researching is the background position. There's lots of things you can do with that. You can use percentages, you can use specific keywords, all kinds of stuff, okay? But this is pretty good. But I want to change that to kind of a cool effect here where all you see is just the search icon and nothing else. Like all the way to the right edge of the screen, it's just a little search button, and then you click it and then the search form appears, right? So that's easy enough to do. First of all, we can just turn off the border on that input. Border, none. Now we just have the search icon. Now just scooch it over. Well, you already had it positioned. We could push it to the right maybe if we wanted to. Now it's already over on the right, right? Now when we click on it, we just want it to appear. That already sort of by nature, the way it works, does that. But we can make it look a little cooler than that. So what we can do is this. We will, on the input, when you are in the focus state, it's a new one for you, we can say border 2 pixels solid. We'll do this gray color that we're using, okay? So now when I click it, there's a black border. When I unclick it, it goes away, okay? But we want it to look like it's growing, right? So right now, if you look at it, it has a width of 200. Let's make the width just barely enough to hold that search image to 25. Okay, and then now if we put a border on it, you'd see that it's only as big as that magnifying glass, right? Let's push it to the right. How can we push it to the right? Yeah, float it to the right. Yep, exactly right. And now it's floated to the right. We could put a little bit of margin right, like 5 pixels, so it's not quite up against the edge there. Right, that's pretty good. Let's make a cursor so it looks like a finger. Cursor pointer. So now it's clear you're supposed to click on it, right? And then in our focus, when we're clicking on it, rather than putting a border, because one kind of naturally appears there, let's just change the width. So the width will go back to 200 pixels, and we will put a transition on the original. Transition width, width 500 milliseconds, okay? So now you get this kind of effect, right? Pretty cool. There's a lot of padding there that we had when we had the placeholder. We don't really need that anymore, so we can remove that padding. That was that line right there. So this is good enough. I don't think we need to go much further, and you can tweak that and play around with it if you want to, right? It's up to you, but I just thought I'd show it to you. That's kind of a cool effect. I don't like this doing that. Do you see that? That's no good. So I think that's just because of that extra padding I had, that margin I gave it. So let's just change that to 195. And I think, yeah, there we go. So that's good. Maybe a little bit of padding right there. Increase the font just a teeny bit. You see how the cursor's right up against the edge there? I start typing. We want that font to be a little bit bigger. Okay. So make the font a teeny bit bigger. Font size 18 pixels, and we'll make the padding 5. That's pretty good. Okay. All right, we're done. Yay. Except it's totally not responsive, right? There's a few things that are going to break when we shrink this up, okay? First thing that's going to be obvious is a real easy thing to fix, but this is a fixed width. It's 1200 pixel width, right? The white part is. And so it's staying at 1200 right now. That's no good, okay? So we can change that very easily right here in the main wrapper to max width. Instead of width, we do max width, which means it will go up to 1200, but it is allowed to be smaller. And that'll just be based on how big the browser window is. So now if I resize, it resizes too. Okay, so already that's way better. But you'll notice, you know, here the menu breaks right here, and the header section's getting a little crowded, right? And down below, look at Phil Murray, he's getting a little squishy too, right? Our comment form's pretty good, pretty responsive. The video's wonky, the menu's wonky, and this is ridiculous right here, okay? So let's target the video. Let me just tell you this. Making YouTube videos responsive is a total pain in the butt, okay? So I use a plugin. It's a really humongous plugin that's like 11,000 lines of code, literally, because you have to import jQuery, and it's a JavaScript thing, okay? So jQuery is the root of all evil, in my opinion. Not a fan of jQuery at all. I literally use it for nothing but this one thing, okay? So the way this thing works is jQuery is a library that is a plugin, if you will. It's not the exact right thing, but it's a sort of a plugin to JavaScript. So you download jQuery and you add it to your server, or you hotlink to the jQuery library. Either way is fine. And then you can use jQuery and write jQuery functions and commands that are all using the jQuery library, okay? So some guy named Chris Coyier, who is the guy behind CodePen and CSS Tricks, he created a plugin called fitvids.js. He calls it lightweight. Yeah, his code's only 80 lines, okay? But it uses jQuery, which is 11,000 lines. So there, you can watch this video here that shows you how to install it, but I already know how to do it. So this is not me teaching you per se how to do this. I'm just going to do it and show you how to do it. And if you want to come back and watch this video again, and by the time you get to the end of the semester and you learn about JavaScript, this will make a little bit more sense. But it's jQuery. jQuery is evil, okay? So what we follow the directions here and just do what it says, but you're basically going to download this fitvids video or this fitvids JavaScript file right here. I've already got it on my desktop right there. So we're going to move that into our JavaScript folder, okay? So right here in JavaScript, I'm moving this in. And I know you guys haven't learned JavaScript yet, and that's fine. And don't worry about understanding what this is doing. Just know that it's magic and it works, okay? So this is Chris Coyier's file. It's 80-something lines of code here. And this is using JavaScript and jQuery, okay? So in order to use this, I have to actually download jQuery. Or I can hotlink to it, right? So we're just going to hotlink to it. So I have over here this text that I just had it already ready to go, okay? So this is a piece of JavaScript. Again, don't worry about understanding it for now. I'm just throwing this in here because I want you guys to see a responsive website. Right here before we close our body tag, that's me hotlinking to JavaScript, or to jQuery. 11,000 lines of code right there, okay? Next up, so that's, you have to do that, and then you follow Chris's instructions, and he will tell you that you now need to link to the JavaScript, this fitvids thing right here that's 80 lines. And so that goes next. So I'm not hotlinking, that's on my server, right? It's my local one. It's the fitvids right there, that's his file. And then last but not least, what you do is this bit of code right here, which is jQuery, goes right after all of that, okay? And so that's just a comment there, you can ignore that. But what's happening here, this, whatever that is that I've highlighted there, you can call it whatever you want. That's a class there. You can see the dot, right? It's a class called resp video, which is what I'm using. I'm just going to stick with, yeah, we'll go with resp video. That's fine. What you need is to put a div that is the parent of the iframe YouTube video, the YouTube video, put a div around it and give it that class name. Okay? So right now we have in our main, there's the div, right? There's the video. So I'm going to go div class equals resp video. Okay, so that is the div that's going around this iframe. We'll close it off down here. And so this little comment says target your container or wrapper or post, etc. Right? It's telling you that right here you target it with whatever the name of the class is. So we called ours resp video. And that thing behaves like magic. It works great, but man, you have to use 11,000 lines of jQuery to make it work. So that's no fun. But let's refresh it now and see. And the first thing you'll notice is the thing goes full size, which I don't think is a bad look. I think that looks pretty cool, right? It's fine. It looks great. What's happening there, that div, well, it's 100% of its parent, right? Which is main, which is that white background part. So it's 100%. And then the way this jQuery plugin works, it just fills up the video inside of whatever its container is. And as I start resizing things, you will see, resize it, it just magically works. Look at that. It's just beautiful, right? It's perfect. Now just to demonstrate what would happen if I did not have that, so we'll turn that off for just a split second there. When I start resizing, I get here, it doesn't resize, it doesn't squish. And you should, on your own time, go in there and experiment with things without the jQuery plugin and see how would you try to make it responsive. And you're going to find really quickly it is a nightmare. Okay? So this plugin's great. So we're going to leave the plugin in there. Now, if Jay wanted to keep this look here, instead of making the video go full size like we were doing, easy. Just resize the div, right? Make the div that wide. Yeah. And how wide is that? Well, the video is 760, so make the div 760. Okay? So that div in our style, we'll just call it div.responsive video, and we'll just say max width, because if we give it a fixed width, it won't shrink, right? Max width of 760 pixels, and then refresh it, and now we need to center the div, but it is now responsive though. See? Okay? So we just center the div, margin 0 auto. There you go. So we're back to where we were, but now our video is responsive. So this is the first class I've ever actually shown you guys how to do that, because there's a bunch of crap that you haven't learned yet, right? So, and it's stuff that you never will learn from me, jQuery. I hate jQuery. Okay. But now it's responsive, and whenever I do a website that has videos in it, I just do what I just did, and my videos are perfect. So the reason, let me explain why this plugin works the way it does, or why it's a pain in the butt if you don't have the plugin. What a lot of people don't recognize is what an iframe really is. This iframe right here, if we go look at it in the actual console over here, so in the body, go down to main, there's our responsive video class we just made, and see this little thing right here, that plugin added that fluid width wrapper video, that's added by the jQuery plugin. Okay, but here's the iframe. So that iframe, when we expand it, it's actually a complete full web page. The HTML tag, the doc type, everything. It's a full web page. So if we look, you'll see. There's the document right there. That's the full document. We click on that. There's the HTML tag. There's a doc type. Open up the HTML tag. There's the head tag right there, right? With all this crap in the head. There's the body tag, right? And inside the body, there's all this other stuff. It's all from YouTube. So if you were to go to this URL right here, that's the video. It's a full, complete page. And all it has on it is the video. You look at the code though, and it's all of this crap. That's inside the iframe. It's all being embedded into your iframe, right? So all of that code is actually on your page. So when you start trying to mess with the iframe and trying to resize it, it's messy. And by the way, iframes are meant to embed somebody else's page into your site. It doesn't have to be a video. You could put somebody else's web page in your site. In fact, let's just real quick do that. If I just say magicreview.com, I'll grab that URL. And we'll come in here. Oh, let's just change the YouTube one, right? Some of these things are not going to be necessary with non-YouTube, so we'll just get rid of some of that. But if I put that URL right there, okay, and we'll hide this for a minute. We'll go to our site, refresh. And there you go. There's my website embedded into this site, right? It's the whole site. I can click around, navigate, go to my reviews page, and it'll stay right here, just embedded into this. That's what iframes are for. Well, it just so happens that what we're embedding is a web page that's nothing but a video, because YouTube designed all of their videos so that they have their own page so that you can do this. Okay, that is our crash course in iframes and responsive videos. That's the end. No more. Okay, because otherwise we're going to go down a rabbit hole and we're not going to get anything else done. All right, let me make sure I fixed it back to the way it was. We're good. It should be responsive still. Yep. Okay. Let's look at that menu now. That menu is kind of hideous. And the Phil Murray will be next after the menu, but we know how to do menus, right? We want to do a hamburger menu, right? So let's actually make a hamburger, like it looks like a hamburger, right? It's the three little lines, okay? It's really easy to do. You can just get an image if you wanted to, right? But you can make one. It's really easy. So let's make it and have it there, even though we only want it to appear at a certain point with our media query. But let's just make it visible everywhere, and then we'll use our media queries to hide and show stuff, right? So let's start here, and right above, where's our navigation? Right here. Right above the UL, we want to make our hamburger menu right here, okay? So div class equals hamburger, and then we'll close it out. Actually, inside of it, we're going to put 3 spans. So there's 1 span, 2, 3, okay, and we'll close that out. And then all we're going to do is style the bottom border of the spans to have like a border, right? Just a little border, and then it'll look like 3 things stacked on top of each other. So we'll target all of that in our CSS. Here's our header stuff. Come down here to navigation stuff, right here, and div.hamburger. And we actually, for the moment, let's target the spans inside of there, okay? And those spans will say border, bottom, 5 pixels, solid. So there, that's what they look like right now, right? So we need to make it smaller. So let's make the div.hamburger, that div that's wrapping them, will make its width 55 pixels. So like that, right? And we'll clean up the padding in a minute to see how that's going to look. Let's put a border around that of 2 pixels, solid, that same color. And we'll give it a little bit of padding, like 2 pixels. Actually, the top will be 0. The red lines, that's the bottom border. Well, so they're evenly spaced, but the very top one, if I put some padding on it, it's going to look further down, right? So let's put it all there and you'll see, okay? So let's see how this looks. So you see how it's not evenly distributed in there? Does that make sense? Let's put a margin around it so you can see it better. Margin, 5 pixels. So you see how it looks lopsided? That's because there's padding at the top, and that top span, we're looking at the bottom of it. That red part is the bottom of that span, right? So we want the top here to be 0. So we're going to go 0 and then 3 pixels for everything else. And now that looks a little bit more even. Maybe we need a little bit of padding on the bottom one there. So top, right, bottom, 5 pixels. It's pretty evenly spaced, yeah? Change it to a better color, of course. And that looks okay. We can maybe put a rounded border on it here. So we'll do border radius. This is an idea of a student in my previous class today. That looks pretty cool. We could tweak it again on and on, right? That's where the 10 hours rack up. We'll maybe center that whole thing, and we'll just have it kind of dead center here, or maybe we'll scooch it to the right. Who knows? We'll play around with it. But for now, let's just make it function, okay? If you'll recall, the last time the way we did this, we would use a checkbox, right? We'd use a checkbox, and then the label would be attached to the checkbox, and then when you click on the label, it would turn the checkbox on and off, and then we would look in the CSS for the status of the checkbox and do something based on that. So let's just go back here, and right here, there's our hamburger. We'll put a checkbox, type equals checkbox, and we'll give it an ID of hamburger, and that's it. What we did before was this, right? We had a label, and we set the for property equal to hamburger, or whatever the ID of the checkbox is, right? Which is hamburger in this case. And then we said menu, right? And we close the label. So the idea of that was when I click on the word menu, that box will get checked or unchecked, right? So you don't have to actually click on the checkbox itself. Then you hide the checkbox, and then clicking on the menu is what toggles everything, right? You just have the checkbox to where you can't see it. Well, instead of the word menu, we'll actually just put this hamburger right there where the word menu is. So now the label is that little hamburger. So now when I click the hamburger, that toggles the checkbox, right? Make sense? So now we want to, when they click on the hamburger, hide and unhide the navigation bar, right? Now we're going to do it right now, but we really want it to only work when we have our media query happening, right? But we're going to do it now just to make sure we can get it functioning. So in here, again, look at the structure. Okay, we have the label, then the input, which is the younger child or younger sibling of the label, and then UL is the younger sibling of the input, right? This is the oldest, this is the second oldest, this is the third oldest. Okay, so we're going to target this when it's in the checked state and grab its younger brother or sister, right? So here we go. We just say right here, we'll go, does it have the ID, right? The ID was hamburger, so input hamburger, and when it's in the checked state, grab its younger brother, right? And then we want it to say display none. So when they check it, it'll hide it or unhide it, right? Okay, so if I refresh, and when it's checked, that goes away, and when it's unchecked, it comes back. And again, if I click on the hamburger, it's turning that on and off, right? So that's the basic idea of what we're looking for. We want to hide that checkbox, so that's easy enough. We'll just hide this right here, display none. So the checkbox is hidden, but it's still functioning as it's supposed to, right? You just can't see it. Okay. So that's the basic idea there. Let's make that into a little finger pointer so that it's clear that you're supposed to click it. That will go right here. Okay, nice. That's what we want. Of course, we want to hide that until we shrink, and then make it appear once we're smaller. So let's hide it right now. So we hide hamburger, display none. Okay, so it vanishes. You can't touch it or do anything with it. And then also notice when we have it checked, we want to actually display the menu, right? Not hide it. Make sense? I was just doing that so you could see what was happening. Okay, so now we want to just make the media query, make it appear. We want to make the media query will show the hamburger and hide the menu, right? So let's see where we want to do it. Like right there is kind of bad, but I don't think it's time to put the hamburger menu just yet, right? I think that we could maybe resize the font just a little bit, right? So let's see what position we're at. We are at 1050. So maybe just 1050 is a good spot. Why not? So here we go, down at the bottom. Keep all my media queries down here. Media, max width, 1050. And we will just set the nav ul li anchor font size equal to like 18 pixels. And that's a little bit better, and it gives us a little bit more breathing room. Not much though, right? We don't want a breakpoint at 1050 and then one at 1030. That's kind of silly. So maybe like 15. Let's see what that looks like. I think it looks all right. So now we can get to here. And I think this overall looks okay still. Yeah? Now notice the video's got a little crowded here, right? Well, right here we could probably, you recall there's a box around it that's been forced to a fixed position. Remember that? To a percentage. So look over here. The thumbnails, this thumb wrap right here, we set that, let's find it, we set it to 70% right there, okay? So maybe with our media query here, we can let that have a little bit of breathing room, maybe put it to 80% or something, right? So down here, we'll just give that 80%, width is 80, I'll do 85. We'll refresh it, and there, a little bit of breathing room, right? Okay. Ooh, no internet, nice. Sorry, we don't need it. We're fine. Okay, so this is looking pretty good so far. I think this is a good breakpoint right here. So 819. So what, 820 probably? And we can mess with the menu. Okay. So new breakpoint. Come down here and we'll say media max width 820 pixels. Okay. What do we want to do to the menu besides make the hamburger appear and make that menu disappear? We want to change the style though, right? So what is that style? What should it look like? Yeah, we should make it vertical, I think. That's a good idea, right? So we can just change the nav ul li to display block, right? Because right now they're a display inline block. So that alone is a good start, right? So now you have this effect. Okay, we could argue that maybe make the font bigger, right? Maybe put a border on it, like a bottom border. And you'll see there's a little teeny, it's hard to see, but there is a white border there on the edge. Okay, so we'll get rid of that border. So we can go border right, none. That'll get rid of the one we put above. And then we can do border bottom, 1 pixel solid white. That's the exact same border we had on the right, but now we're putting it on the bottom, right? Maybe now this is too wide. So maybe we can target that a little bit and say nav ul. We'll make the width, I don't know, 75%. And we'll go margin 0 auto, center it. And that's a little weird. We're going to do something with the header though, that might help a little bit. Maybe we can put a round, I don't know, do we want a rounded corner on the UL or something like that? I don't think that would look right. That looks a little better, I don't know. Remember, this thing's only going to appear when we click on the hamburger anyway, but we want it to look somewhat decent. So yeah, let's try to center the text, that might look okay. Let's make the font a little bit bigger as well. So let's make the font bigger, nav ul li anchor, and we'll make the font size 20. That's pretty good. And let's squish this up a little bit more, like 50%. And let's make it maybe a margin on the top, just a hair, 10 pixels. And you want to try centering it, you said? So centering it, right now the anchor tag is inline block, so we should be able to get away with this. About text align. It's probably taking up the full width. So let's make it display block as well. There we go. So what do you think? Look okay? Again, this is where the hours rack up, right? And this is the kind of thing where you're like, you get on the phone with the client and like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And if you can, you sit down with them and you right there tweak some of the settings in the code and let them look at it, right? But this, we could spend hours on this, but this is close enough, right? So now what we can do is we want to hide this whole thing. The nav is going to be hidden right here. Display none. And we want to show the hamburger. So div.ham, not dot, it was a octothorpe, hamburger, display block. And maybe I targeted the wrong thing. Oh, it's the label. Yeah, the label. Sorry about that, guys. We want to show that. Or actually, we want to show the class equals hamburger, which means I actually goofed up when we hit it earlier, where I did class hamburger. We actually want to, we don't want to hide the hamburger class, we want to hide that whole label, right? Because if the label's still there, even though it's like infinitely small, there may be a little teeny area that is clickable, and somebody might discover it and click it and the menu will vanish. They won't know what happened. So we're going to hide the label. That hides everything. And then down here, we'll bring the label back. And if you got more than one label on your page, just make sure you're specific with your classes and stuff, right? Okay, so save this, refresh, there we go. So that shows up. So maybe we want to center that. Yeah. So make the label, it's already display block right there, which is great. And we'll just do text align. Actually, that will not work. That might work. The reason it won't work is because we have a div inside of it that's block level. We need to do a margin auto on the div on the middle, right? Margin 0 auto. There we go. Okay. Okay, now it's a little crowded. One thing we could do is put something around it and make it the same background, like a line across the page. That's the same gray color, right? You know what I'm saying? The same gray color as the actual menu, which by the way is working, of course. Okay. So maybe we can put background color there. I don't know. This is where you have to have a good design eye. Maybe we want to move the hamburger over. Maybe we want to move all this social media stuff somewhere else. Who knows? Okay. This is a good start though. Just for a minute, let's hide the header just for 2 seconds to see what that looks like with it not there. So header, display, none. Like all that's gone. And then we'll put a little bit of margin on that label there, like 10 pixels. Nav.main, padding top, 20 pixels. Something's going on there. That should be pushed down. Let me see what I called, make sure I got the right, oh, main nav, that's why. I'm using the wrong target. Main nav, okay. There we go, that's what I was trying to do. Okay, maybe we don't even want this anymore, right? Maybe. Let's just hide that for a minute as well. And that one was called breadcrumbs, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll just do that, comma, div.breadcrumbs. Oh, it's a nav, duh. Thank you, sorry about that. There we go, okay. That looks okay. It's not hideous. What if though there was a gray border across the whole, around the whole thing, and this was scooted over to the side? So I'll show you an example of that. If you go to my site and get certain size here, you get that, right? Right, that looks okay. So we could do that if you wanted to. We could play around with that. So at the very least, I think this needs to be scooted over to the right. I don't think it looks good centered. So let's do that. Let's move it over. Display, flex, and then the label is what we're messing with here. So we will leave you alone for just a minute. Except you need to be display block so we can see you. And he's stretching right now, so we're going to do right here, align items to center and justify content, flex end. Okay, now if we put a background on this, that was the whole reason I wanted to do this. This main nav here, give it a background color of that same gray or maybe just a shade. I think it's 333. That's the color I meant to do. Yeah, there we go. And turn off that red border because that's ridiculous. And that looks okay, right? We click on that, the menu comes up. We need to fix that now. Do I have a force height on the nav still? I think that's, yeah, that's what's broken there. We left that on accident. There we go. Okay, so now, that's what I was looking for. That's weird, not quite there, because it's a flex box item, right? The UL is a flex item as well. Follow? Does that make sense? All right, so let's put some padding in that nav real quick, and then we'll fix that flex issue. Okay, so padding, 5 pixels. That looks a little bit better, okay. And the other thing, before we fix this rest of this menu here, okay, because that's ridiculous, let's get rid of this up here. That's just the margin from the outside of the body or whatever. Or the outside of the wrapper, way the heck up here. It's that margin right there. So let's just get rid of that so it's 0. And then we'll fix the navigation. I think we'll be good. So div.wrapper. And we'll just set the margin on that to be 0. Margin top to be 0. Okay, so that cleans that up. So that looks pretty nice, actually. I think that looks really good. Okay, and these videos aren't too squished. We need to deal with this though, right? That's no good. Okay, you understand the problem? Because the nav is flex, well, that's a flex item, and the UL is a flex item, right? So one thing we could do is make the flex direction columns so that the UL will be below instead of to the side, right? Because again, let's look at this and so we can see. This whole thing right here, right? That whole area is one box, and this whole area is another box, and they're side by side because they're flexed. So if we rotate this to do flex direction column, now we'll deal with that centering issue in a minute, but there we go. That's what we're looking for, right? So the way we fix that is, now that we've rotated the flex, we need to change this right here from justify content to the end to align items. And there we go. That's okay. I mean, it's not the best thing in the world, but I don't hate it. Maybe we could put a box around that. A little border around the UL. Is this guy right here. Border, 1 pixel, solid. Let's go a little darker. Like, let's just go 0. Well, let's do 2. You can kind of see it, right? Can you see it back there? Yeah, on the screen you probably can't see it at all, but it is there. Let's make it 0, so maybe that'll show up better. All right, can you see that? Now maybe we want to float that over to the right as well, right? We can play around. Lots of different things you can do. Maybe we can turn off all of the borders completely, and it'll look like it's just centered in that gray area, right? So we turn this border off, and we turn off the bottom border down here, and now it looks like it's just part of the whole thing, right? It's tweaky. It's tweaky stuff, guys, okay? Yeah, it does take some trial and error. But I think this little menu thing looks really cool. I think that looks really nice, and it's a decent looking design. So how could we scooch this guy over to where it's over here? Do we even want to do that? Maybe we want to move this over to the left and have this menu underneath that on the left side. But how can we move this over? What's the first step? Put a border on it, right? So we can see it. We just had it a second ago. Border, 2 pixels, solid red. Okay, so we see where it's at. What do we need to do to move it? So the item here is the UL right here. This guy, we've got margin auto on him right here, right? If we turn that off, that should scooch him over. There we go. Now it looks a little weird. I don't know if that's the right place for it, but I'm just trying to show you how you can manipulate this stuff. And as this thing gets smaller, that'll look better and better, right? And of course we won't leave that red border on there. Right there, we don't need that. Maybe we put the underlines back on it, right? That's the 10 hours, right? We're not going to go there. Maybe this is better centered. Maybe everything's better centered. Let's change the flex on this, or the align, to center. And we'll also do justify content center. Okay, so it's in the middle, and it's in the center like that. I think that alone is pretty good. But if we go back to putting a border on this, where we had border, 1 pixel, solid black. And I would make that a little more subtle, like maybe a 222, but because you're looking at it on the screen, you can't really see it, so I'm going to do black. And let's see what that looks like. Now there's a black border around it, and if we put those bottom borders back on there, border bottom, 1 pixel, solid white. Maybe make this white, like 888, it's close to white. That looks okay, right? Maybe? Yeah, so the question was, can we make it appear over the page instead of pushing the content down? And yes. So how would we do that? That's pretty easy. It's all positioning stuff, right? So what we would want to do is make the UL here, let's look at our structure. We want the UL to be positioned absolute. So it's on top of everything, okay? So it's sort of out of the flow. So that means we need to make its parent, which is this nav right here, position relative. So we'll go position relative, and then we make the nav UL position absolute. That's a start. Let's just see what that looks like. Yeah, already that's basically what we're looking for, right? So now with our Z index, let's move it forward so we can see it. Z index 1, default is 0. So now it's on top of everything. Now just push it down, right? So we push it down with a little bit of top, like 50, we'll see. And then we'll look in the console and tweak it as we need to. Oh, it's perfect. Okay, there you go. So that's one way to do it. And our video disappeared again. Let's see if, there it is. Yep. Yeah, so that's good. I like that. Now we could tweak that header and do some stuff with that. We might want to resize this to where it'll flex wrap, right? It's already flex. We can make it wrap. So let's just do that. It'll take 2 seconds. The thumb wrap right there. So we can go down here and where we're displaying that and related thumbs right here. Thumb wrap is display flex. If we just set the default here right in outside the media query to flex wrap. There, so now they wrap, right? Looks pretty good. Overall, it looks good. I mean, the only thing that's missing is the header, and maybe we could think about that. Maybe we could squeeze the header down in here instead, resize some of the icons, right? You can move it to the bottom. Yeah, lots of different things you can do. We just ran out of time, okay? Keep in mind this one thing. We could spend probably another half day to get some final tweaking on the CSS to make it fully responsive. But I think you've seen some ideas and concepts that you can play around with, right? So, and you get some ideas of what looks good, what doesn't look good. I think that looks pretty good overall. It maybe needs some tweaking, right? Okay, anyway, that's the end of that.